this is one of our most important pieces because number one, Walt Kuhn, an early 20th century modern artist, which means he was on the cutting edge of art in America at that time when things were changing rapidly. Things were changing with society, things were changing with art, and he was right in there. In fact, he was a real mover and shaker in terms of bringing those exciting European innovations in art to America and introducing them to America for one of the first times at the 1913 Armory Show, for which he was one of the founders. So your question to me is, what then about this piece is modern?
Right.
Yeah. So what's modern about this piece is the way Walt Kuhn painted it. And he was an artist who was at that transition. He was keeping in mind and keeping in his artistic practice some very traditional kinds of ways of representation, ways of representing the world, right? He knew that we wanted to see things, by and large, in America still in ways that we recognized, right? And yet he's giving us some moments, even in this painting, in which he's taking from some of those European modern precedents and adopting them as his own. Notice the general flatness of this painting, right? I think it was Museum of Modern Art curator Kurt Varnedoe who described the era of modern art as the road to flatness. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? Because what happened? Artists in that period, during the Industrial Revolution, were starting to recognize, right, I'm translating the 3- and 4-dimensional world onto a 2-dimensional surface. That's artifice, right? That's an artificial practice. And so why not acknowledge the flatness of that surface? Why not acknowledge what paint is, right? It's this sticky, pigmented substance that we're spreading around a 2-dimensional surface. And there's excitement in that. There's something new in that. And so as you look at this painting, you see this general flatness in the figures. You see a flatness in the background. Yeah, we can look at that background and think, well, that's probably a curtain. But we come to a point in which it might not even matter, right? It becomes a color, right? And a color evokes a feeling. And he's also using that color very wisely. Notice how that green of the background contrasts with that very warm, hot pink of the costumes there. Notice in the center figure what happens in those spaces in between that figure and the two to either side. You become very aware of those interstitial spaces between the figures, and in that become more aware of the overall composition and the balance of this. Notice how their faces are painted pretty realistically. They're painted as we might expect. He wants us to see the differentiation in their expressions and the difference in their facial features, but he's doing something even in the faces here that he probably learned as a young artist you don't do. There are outlines around particular features in the faces. Look at the outlines around the ears. Look at the outlines around the lips on these figures. You know, you learn as a young artist, you don't paint outlines around things because there are no outlines around things in the real world. And yet he's showing us that even these features are shapes just as much as anything else. And in their shapes, they're interesting to look at. So look all over the painting and notice how he's really defined particular shapes, all the way from the overall figures to the way the figures transition from that background down to the floor. Notice the outlines around the feet, and he's keeping us moving back and forth with this combination of recognizable form and ways of representing that, and very flat areas of shape and color.